Good evening. I'm Mayor Don Donovan, and I want to thank you all for being here tonight. On behalf of the City of Pleasant Hill, I want to welcome you to our Economic Development 101 Community Education event. I appreciate each of you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us and be part of the conversation about the future of our community. The purpose of tonight is really pretty simple. It's about education and engagement. We hear the term economic development used all the time, but it can mean different things to different people. Some think of it as new businesses or new jobs. Others think of housing, infrastructure, or commercial growth. The truth is, economic development touches all of those things. It affects the services the city can provide, the strength of our local economy, and the opportunities we create for future generations who choose to call Pleasant Hill home. And before we start talking about strategies or projects, I think it's important that we all have a common understanding of what economic development actually is, how it works, and why communities across Missouri and the country are investing time and effort into building long-term economic development plans. And that's what tonight is all about. One of the goals identified in our 2040 comprehensive plan is the creation of an economic development council. As we started discussing what that would look like for Pleasant Hill, it became clear that the first step shouldn't be creating a committee or drafting a plan. The first step should be bringing people together to learn, ask questions, and build a shared understanding of where we are today and where we want to be in the future. That's why we put together a steering committee made up of local leaders and professionals with experience in this field. And that's why we're hosting this event tonight. We're fortunate to have several experienced economic development professionals with us this evening who have generously volunteered their time and expertise. They have worked with communities facing many of the same opportunities and challenges that we face, and they can offer valuable insight into how thoughtful planning and collaboration can help a community succeed in the long term. As we move forward, our goal isn't just growth for growth's sake. Our goal is to be intentional. We want to support our local businesses, attract the kind of opportunities that fit our community, strengthen our tax base, and preserve the character and quality of life that make Pleasant Hill such a special place to live. So, before we get into tonight's presentation, I want to recognize the steering committee members who helped make this event possible and who are working alongside myself, Councilman Patterson, and city staff, and who have laid the groundwork for the Economic Development Council. I want to give a special thank you to Teresa Evans, a Pleasant Hill resident and former economic development professional who's worked with Lee Summit Economic Development Council, Blue Springs Economic Development Council, and the Missouri Department of Economic Development. I also would like to thank Stephanie Borger and Tina Chase, who are going to be part of the panel tonight as well, and you'll hear more about their credentials in just a few moments. So, without further ado, again, thank you for all of you for being here and being willing to be part of this process. At this time, I'd like to introduce our city administrator, Kristen Dorman, and she's going to share a little bit more about how economic development impacts our city services, our city revenues, and the long-term financial health of our community.
Great, thank you, Mayor. So as we mentioned before we start tonight's panel discussion, I really just wanted to take 2 minutes to explain why is this important to the city as an entity to talk about economic development. As part of the FY27 budget process, I shared a message with our city council about some of the financial realities that we're beginning to see. Like many communities, we're facing rising costs across the board. Infrastructure becomes more expensive to maintain as it ages. Equipment, materials, and contracted services cost more than they did just a few years ago. Recruiting and retaining employees has become more competitive every year. help support operations in recent years have declined significantly. We now find ourselves in a situation in which expenses are growing faster than revenues, and as we all know, that is unsustainable. To maintain current service levels, the FY27 budget anticipates using fund balances in several of our major operating funds while we evaluate long-term solutions. While that works for this year because of our healthy fund balance levels, fund balances are savings accounts, not permanent revenue sources. My message to council was this: we have to make some changes for the long-term financial health of our city. So let's talk about where the city's revenue comes from. Pleasant Hill relies on several different revenue sources, and economic activity plays a major role in supporting city operations and community investment. In our FY27 budget, the city expects to receive approximately $2.1 million in property tax revenue and approximately $2.5 million in sales tax revenue. Outside of the charges for service for water and sewer, sales tax and property tax are the top two revenue generators for the city. Our voters have approved dedicated sales taxes over the years that support parks, transportation improvements, and capital projects. Today, the city receives a total of 2.75% in local sales taxes, and those revenues help fund many of the amenities and infrastructure improvements that residents enjoy. That means that our top revenue source is highly volatile and fully dependent on the economic activity in our city. When businesses are successful, when residents shop locally, and when new investment comes into the community, it helps strengthen the city's financial position and supports the services that we provide. The challenge we're facing is that revenue, sales tax growth, has slowed, yet our costs continue to rise. So why does that matter for our conversation tonight? There are only a few strategies that cities have to address long-term financial challenges. We can reduce services, we can ask residents to pay more for new or increased taxes, or we can try to grow our economy and expand our tax base. The third option is one we really like to be better at and put more emphasis on. Economic development helps create a stronger and more diversified tax base. It can bring new businesses, create jobs, and attract investment, which in turn can generate additional sales tax revenue and expand opportunities for both residents and entrepreneurs. It's one of the few tools available to local governments that can improve the city's financial position without simply shifting additional costs onto our residents. I do want to set realistic expectations though, and I'm sure our panelists will hit on this tonight as well. Economic development is not a quick fix. There isn't a singular project, business, or development that suddenly will change our financial future overnight. The communities that are successful at this have been working at it for years. They have a plan, they build partnerships, and they stay focused on long-term goals. So that's really why it's important for us to have this conversation now. We need to create strategies to set ourselves up for long-term financial success. We need to start planning for the future before our financial pressures become even larger challenges. As the mayor mentioned, our comprehensive plan recognized that need when it recommended the creation of an economic development council. We've also set aside money in this year's budget to conduct studies to help us better identify the types of industry that we should try to bring in. But before we start building a long-term strategy, we felt it was important to help the community better understand what economic development is, what it isn't, and how it can impact our future. We're fortunate to have these experienced professionals with us this evening who have spent their careers helping communities navigate these exact issues. They're going to help explain the tools, opportunities, and challenges that are associated with this work. And one of them that I'm very excited to introduce is our moderator for tonight, Stephanie Warner, who is Director of Operations and Business Development for Collins Webb Architecture. Stephanie brings more than 25 years of experience in business operations, economic development, marketing, community engagement, and strategic growth. Before joining Collins Webb, she worked with the Lee Summit Economic Development Council and has spent much of her career building relationships that connect businesses, local governments, developers, and community organizations. A Pleasant Hill resident, Stephanie is deeply invested in the success of her community and has volunteered extensively with local youth, parks and recreation initiatives, civic organizations, and advocacy efforts supporting children with special needs and their families. Her passion for community growth and economic development makes her an ideal moderator for tonight's discussion on how strategic economic development shapes the future of Pleasant Hill. So I will turn it over to
Director at Platte County Economic Development Council. Since taking the helm in 2022, she has led initiatives to drive investment, workforce development, and economic growth throughout Platte County. With more than a decade of experience in economic development, including 7 years with the Lee Summit Economic Development Council, Tina is known for her strategic thinking, innovative leadership, and strong regional partnerships. Tina is also a fierce advocate for workforce development and real-world learning initiatives. Thank you, Tina, for joining us. Tracy Brantner serves as the Executive Director of Johnson County Economic Development Corporation and brings more than 30 years of economic development experience to the profession. A recognized leader in workforce and professional development, she currently chairs the Missouri Economic Development Council's Professional Development Committee and oversees the Missouri Certified Economic Developer Program. Tracy's career spans rural development, agricultural, small business, and community growth, giving her a unique perspective on what it takes to build thriving communities. Tracy, thank you very much. So, let's talk about economic development basics. Ladies, what is economic development and why does it matter?
I guess that's me. So, as was mentioned by Crystal earlier, economic development is different for everyone. I want to emphasize that economic development is also different for every community. So depending on the size of the community, where you're located, business plays a huge part in offsetting taxes for individuals. And I would like to preface by saying I was a resident for 25 years in Pleasant Hill. So I deeply understand the benefit of Pleasant Hill and why people come here. It's a great, great community, and I love the way that everyone really kind of comes together. You really see that, especially at Christmas time. I really love that you started ATC. So I miss that actually. So economic development is really important to offset. It's really about creating avenues to increase tax and to offset tax to individuals who live in your community.
Thank you. So it is really humbling for me to be here this evening. I've always loved Pleasant Hill. It's a great community, and now I guess I need to move here before everybody else does. So I look forward to that move. So economic development for me, actually this will be my 40th year I've done economic development. I said 30 plus just because, I'm not really that old, and so I wanted to make sure that you knew that, I started this job when I was 12. But economic development for me is also being a support system for small business
Kansas City, Missouri zip codes in my county. And then as you move further north, it becomes that suburban and rural area. So we consider Platte City to be that suburban area for us, even though it's really kind of rural. So you've got, where it has always been very rural community, now with the airport being redone, there's a 3,300 acre, industrial park right next to the airport now, which has come on deck since I've been there. And that has really landed a lot of major mega projects. Millions and billions of dollars of companies that we have attracted, including, I think it's targeted for almost up to 9,000 jobs in the 33 acre park. So when I talk about the Kansas City Metro and it's encroaching north into Platte City, they're trying to determine who they are. They have always been a small rural community who has been very well suited for them. But now that they're so close to development, they really are starting to see other companies wanting to attract them. And they're not prepared. They have not set the groundwork for infrastructure, meaning, extreme highways and bridges and making sure that it's capable for trucking, for example, if you're gonna attract something like that. And if you think about a company who would bring a lot of capital investment or dollars to your community, more than likely they're gonna maybe have a trucking component. Right now, you're not seeing a lot of corporate relocations because of COVID. And that's really created some uncertainties in the market in Kansas City Metro, not just Kansas City, but all areas because of that. Lots of work remote or work from home, which they're now trying to bring back. So I say all of those things because they've done some strategic planning, master planning, and trying to determine what that is. Now, you can have a comprehensive master plan, and that really looks further out, right? It's gonna hit 10, 20 years typically. It's really important that you take from that comp plan and then determine what are the action items that we can do now, right? And planning for the future is really about highway access. It's about the utilities, knowing how much capability do you have here in power. That's important, obviously, for lots of reasons around the metro right now, but especially important if you're going to attract larger. Workforce quality is a data set that these site selectors and these major companies will look at. It used to be maybe third or fourth in line on the list, and now it is first or second. We're still hearing that companies from international or national are asking about incentives. They will all ask about incentives, but if the workforce is not close enough to come, it doesn't matter. They won't even have the conversation or negotiation about the incentive process. So housing and placemaking, meaning this is a great place to live. It could also be a great place to work. And wouldn't it be great if you weren't driving 30 minutes or an hour to get a high-paying job? So it's best if you create the high-paying jobs in your community and or very close to your community. And you can't control those other cities. You can only control yourself. So I think it's really important to dig in and make sure you have the assets that companies will look for.
I'll also add, those assets include available sites and buildings inventory, from very small spaces that like a makerspace all the way up to very large tracts of land that are planned for infrastructure. I will give you another example. So we in Johnson County, we don't have what we would call a private developer in our market that's the engagement and that ecosystem that has to be built at the local level. Because nobody does your downtown like you do your downtown, I guarantee you. There's no other downtown that's as unique as Pleasant Hill, on the planet. So do what's unique to you, what's your unique selling feature, and do it, 150%, because at that point, people will want to gravitate to the experience, to the wonderful experience that they can have in Pleasant Hill. I'm sorry, I think I went on a sidetrack. Did I find my soapbox? I don't know.
That very much plays into the live, work, play part of it, and that is how our rural communities compete in economic development, so that's an important part of it, so. Aside from the live, work, play, can you share some real world examples of, rural development that has been successful in your community?
So right down the road on 7th Highway, you have Lakeland One. And you'll notice it has mostly been residential for as long as I've known, and I grew up in Lisa. So I've been in this area for a long time. And it took putting more cost-effective houses closer together to get you a quick trip. So think about that. I mean, retail, we'll get to this in a few minutes, but retail follows real house. How many people are gonna visit the retail location? Traffic counts are important. And so, if I'm looking to attract something retail, that's the information I'm gonna put up front when I'm reaching out to those particular retailers. Because I'm gonna say, I have X amount of people living in this radius, and right next to that is, need someone who's got this, that, so I think that's a really good example for you to be able to visualize, to understand that, housing and residential is wonderful for growing up, and raising your children, and you might be fine with going to Lisa to drive 20 minutes to eat, but what if you didn't have to, and the money went right back into Pleasant Hill? And I know you have a lot of individuals who've done restaurants and maybe done well and not done well, but did they have the support they needed besides just shopping? Probably not. And it really takes working with those owners who've maybe never done any other kind of business to make sure that they have the resources they need to understand how to keep business thriving. And that's really a lot of what we do, whether it is entrepreneurs, small business, medium size. I will tell you, expanding a business, I will do it all day long. Attracting a business is much harder. So once you get going, it really kind of can just be like Domino's model. If you plan and you do it.
I want to talk a little bit about manufacturing, recruitment. So, when we say the word recruitment, we actually, and Tina just said it, but we actually do very little recruitment, in our community. We spend the majority of our day supporting, again, those small businesses, existing businesses in our community, providing that kind of support that they need day in and day out. But when we do recruitment, it is something that we're prepared for. So, at a moment's notice, you could get a phone call, and that phone call, you wouldn't know who it would be. You wouldn't be able to find out who it is. It'll go by project name. That call would come in. It's usually real estate driven. For example, they may have seen a piece of ground or a building on your website or on a realtor's website, whichever the case may be, and that recruitment effort then begins. And at that point, that you are making every effort to be professional, productive, without knowing a lot about much. So you've got to ask the right questions. we actually did 2 different site visits. The city did one, and then I did one, because we were, interestingly enough, we didn't need to know about, the other project, or we didn't know about the other project, because of confidentiality, sorry. Moving people like myself. But anyway, we landed that company, and finally came out who it was, and it was Janesville Acoustics, and they're tier 2 manufacturer for the auto industry. And so, you just never know, it's a case by case basis, but I guess the bottom line is, and I've said too many words already, but the bottom line is being ready, being prepared, having somebody to answer that phone every day, to have the information at their fingertips. That's the bottom line. That's really being ready for recruitment. Even when you haven't really done any recruitment, maybe, for the last couple of weeks, maybe you have, but you're always ready. Sorry about that long-winded.
Tracy, you just touched on it in recruitment, so can also be boiled down to site selection. And site selection, I don't think that, folks outside of economic development quite understand site selection.
And now you don't know it either, because I didn't do a very good job of explaining.
What is a site selector's job?
The site selector's job is to eliminate you.
What is your job?
Stay in the game.
Stay in the game. Tell us a little bit about the site selection process and what that really looks like, whether it's coming in from the state or. Yeah.
You do a very good job.
I've been doing this a lot lately, so I think there are multiple ways that you can be reached out about potential property and business, someone who's looking to put a business in your community. But the site selection process, there are actually site selectors who work for, firms, and they have clientele lists that are international, national companies. And the entire project, and they call them projects, go with the code name. So somebody, it could be myself, picks a code name, and it's usually has nothing to do with the company, so that we can't figure it out. We will get very basic metrics. So it will say, this is a manufacturer, the project is called Project Maxwell, and they need 20 megawatts of electricity, they're gonna use X amount of water, they need so much acreage, they'll give you about the basics. You still don't know who they are. They may tell you, we're gonna put $1 million into this facility, so you at least know, okay, this is a big project. We require them to tell us how many jobs you can bring, because that's what's really important to us, is the community aspect of it, even though they're just trying to do a transaction. So there is a lot of back and forth. This usually takes anywhere between 18 and 24 months, where you're negotiating, you're actually putting the deal together. There are development attorneys who will work up the deals, and, the cities or usually it's the cities who are incentivizing, and they're using a state mechanism where they're getting a tax break. We'll go through that a little bit maybe, but there are different ways, depending on where you're located. So different states have different tools, which is why you might have heard, hey, how come Missouri lost the Chiefs to Kansas? Well, that's because they have something called the STAR bonds, which are basically cash, right? So they're literally giving things like that away. And I will tell you, Missouri is much more conservative. We're not going to give the farm away. And we're gonna be more intentional. Is that good or bad? I don't know. But as a resident, I'm okay with it. I can drive to Kansas. But when you ask the governor, he's not gonna say the same thing, right? That's a lot of money that we're gonna be missing out on. And we have to figure out how to replace it, because we're already spending it. So from a site selector, they're looking at population, you don't have the acreage for sale or anywhere to put a business, then you've got to be a little bit more creative. But the process of site selection and negotiation is a very hefty deal, and we're dealing with lots of dollars. It's not just one person's decision. Most of the time, it will go through a process at a city in order to get approved. And I'm sure you're hearing a little bit about that in the newspapers and online a lot. So paying attention is a good thing. I mean, you want to know what you want, right? Pleasant Hill needs to know what they're trying to attract, what they absolutely do not want. And that's part of this process.
Thank you, Denise. So I want to get to one of the questions that I know our community members would like to discuss, or at least know more about, which is retail attraction and commercial growth. And why we don't have more restaurants and stores here. We hear a lot of that in the community, and, I think that this is a great opportunity for us to, maybe break some of the misconceptions about why they do or do not attract the rural community like us.
I'll just say from my perspective, where I'm located in Platte, I do not seek to attract retail. And the reason is because usually if you do all the other steps for a community, they're gonna come. So they don't, like to be recruited. They like to use their own data. They don't care if your data is better, they don't believe you. So I've only heard of one time an actual retailer was traditionally recruited, and it was to the state of Arizona. It was someone who presented on this exact topic, and it was to surprise Arizona. They spent major dollars on social media, on major social media campaigns to attract a Trader Joe's. Yeah, a Trader Joe's. And let me just tell you, I can't get a Trader Joe's if I wanted to get a Trader Joe's, because they, for some reason, don't really care for the serving. They love campus. And this was a lot of money, time, and effort. It was basically understanding the company. When is the company's birthday? We're gonna put it out on social media. We're gonna have everybody put it out on social media and say, happy birthday, Trader Joe's, we wish you were here, right? They're gonna send them things in the mail to the decision makers, the CEOs. I mean, this is a big deal. Most communities can't do that. Pleasant Hill's not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that in Platte County. So retail follows the numbers, and doing the other work and bringing in other businesses first is really gonna help you get the retail that you're looking
I think that was Rock's hard answer, right? I don't think that had anything else to share with that.
The retailers follow the rooftops and the traffic and the income and the consumer spreading, and I promise they have more information than anyone here can give them. They have, they choose where they're gonna go much of the time. If it's not a franchise that you can buy in.
really focus in on that downtown and linking to, the bike trail, which is a hot item that, could really help draw people in to spend some money in downtown. So there's a lot of nuances here that need to be considered, and it's kind of like, chicken or the egg, where do you start?
What is retail leakage?
Give us the data geek. Okay. So, retail leakage is the percentage or number of individuals who are purchasing items in the community that is located maybe adjacent to you or that sort of thing. So it's the number of individuals that are leaving your community to make purchases at Aldi's perhaps, in another community. And so if enough retail leakage is garnered and you can put enough data behind it, that is the number, one of the numbers that you use when you're trying to do retail recruitment.
That does not give you permission to spend your money elsewhere. I think we hit on what retailers are looking for when they're coming to a community, so, let's get into the small business and entrepreneurship and why that matters so much to a community like Pleasant Hill.
So, as I mentioned earlier, one of our 5 pillars in our strategic plan for Johnson County and all of the communities that we serve in Johnson County is to support a small business ecosystem, support that entrepreneur. And so in 2018, we decided to get the training necessary, purchase the type of resources necessary to be the Small Business Development Center for Johnson County. That was our way of implementing all of that Small Business Development Center support services, resources, things like that, that you may not be familiar with. That is so important. I don't care what size community you are. For example, when the pandemic hit, we were working 6 to 7 days a week, basically triage for the small business owners, entrepreneurs in our communities across Johnson County. From, talking about the PPP items that they could avail themselves of to the economic disaster dollars, just whatever it took to keep them in business for the next, so many months. Let's just get to the next, get to the next. Keep people, keep them hired. And fortunately, we weathered that storm, I think, pretty well. If you look at some of the data and the economic data that you might have handy, you can see that Johnson County did a pretty darn good job of weathering that storm and that pandemic. It wasn't us. It was the small business people that were knocking on our door, on Saturdays and Sundays, asking for assistance, and then, being ready when the time came to go talk to their bank, to go, make the kind of connections that they needed to in order to be successful. That's the kind of day in, day out persistence, patience, that is needed, when you're talking about supporting entrepreneurs and small business owners, in your community.
I'll tell a little story about
you know, it is the culture of saying, you know, I want to be my own boss, I want to provide a service or sell a product, I don't even know how to get started. I'm fortunate enough, and actually in Kansas City Metropolitan, we are all fortunate enough to have a lot of organizations who only focus on small business entrepreneurship. And so I know that I can't be great at everything, but I know a lot of people. And economic development is a relationship-based industry in and of itself. And it's really just about knowing who's the right person to call to make a connection for somebody else. And I will probably stop working on a major mega project just to help the little guy, because I know how important typically that is for him or her, for her family, but also for the community. Sometimes big projects come and go, right? But the bread and butter of your community are the people that are living there and really bringing it back into the community.
So the city has a 2040 comprehensive plan. As Kristen had pointed out, economic development is part of that in there. Economic development moving forward is part of that. The ladies have explained to us that economic development is a long game. It is not going to happen overnight. It is something that you have to continue building on for a long time. We hope to someday be in a position in Pleasantville to have projects that offer incentives, right? That's the goal. We'd like to have a healthier tax base, and that may take some incentives down the road. Private businesses request incentives, and I'm going to make this a two-part question. What are the common incentive requests that you see?
So I fundamentally believe that if you're really talking to a business owner or a site consultant, and you have done your homework the way maybe you should have, you will know why that business is asking for incentives. More often than not, it's because they have a gap. They have a profitability that they have to meet, and they have to minimize risk, and they have to minimize cost. And so being profitable and minimizing those risks are usually the things that drive the difference between incentives and the ask for incentives. So we teach a finance class. I'm one of the finance class teachers, I guess, for the state. And my good friend Mark Stumbaugh always says, what are we solving for? If we have a project and they ask for incentives, our next question is usually not, we usually say, yeah, we'll consider incentives, but what are we solving for? And we put that question back to them so that they tell us, what are we solving for? Is it a gap in land costs? Is it a risk factor in transportation? Is it there's no infrastructure there, that they need, or maybe they need fire suppression system, or what is the problem that we're solving for? Because we have a plethora of incentive and financing tools that we can put towards the project, but we have to know what we're doing, why they need those incentives, because not all incentives are one size fits all. And so we have to know what we're doing in order to provide a recommendation for those incentives.
Did I answer? Yeah, you did. So, and really, it's, as she mentioned, what type of project is this as well?
Right.
So, where is it gonna be located? What are the rules and regulations for the area in which this business is going? So, maybe the city of Kansas City is gonna have a lot more tools in their tool belt than Platte City, which would be comparable to Pleasant Hill. So, when I mentioned Platte City is kind of trying to determine whether they're suburban or rural, it's because there was some land sold for an industrial park in Platte City. Well, once, they kind of got to that point, the developer came to the city and said, I can bring you some really good tax base, but I can only do it if you help me help you. And the city said, we've never done this before. We're gonna have to hire an attorney, we want you to pay for that attorney. Right? I was like, I haven't heard that one before, but okay, let's see if they do it. And they did. So what happened was, they were able to really kind of sit down and talk about what is the gap, right? Like we mentioned, what are we talking about here? And we put it back on them to say, give me a pro forma, give me a spreadsheet. I want to know how much you're spending in, or estimating in construction materials, how much is the land, how much is it going to cost for the construction company to build it? I mean, down to the nitty gritty. We also want to know at the end of the day when they're opening a business, how many people are gonna work there, how much are they paying these people? We wanna be sure that what you're paying them is comparable to everyone else around you, if not a little more, because that's quality of life, we expect that. And so you have to really communicate as a small community to folks that are gonna develop for you or bring you a business, what your expectations are. And you have to really kind of understand what other parameters other communities have put around you. Because if you go too hard, they're gonna say, well, I can just do this right over here about 15 minutes from here. And they're not giving me that much, trouble. So it is a game, it is a negotiation, but at the end of the day, once you go through it, it's like, oh, okay, that worked. And the most important thing I try to tell people when it comes to incentives is you start at zero. That empty ground is making you no money. It's just sitting there. Because it's agriculture, they're paying probably next to nothing in taxes. And if you bring that, how much money are you gonna make? And so we expect them to put that out there on the table to tell us. And then we check our sources, we make sure everything's accurate, we sign documents, and we hold them accountable to the incentive that we give them. We say, if you're gonna get this incentive, these are the expectations you have to hit. And if you do not do that, there's consequences for it. And so I think that's a bit of a misconception that people have about incentives, is we're not just giving cash. Nobody gives cash. You can't even really do that, I don't think. So, it's about making a deal. Well, unless you're Kansas, exactly. So it's really about making a deal. You want it to work for them, you want it to work for you, you want it to work for the citizens. It needs to be an asset, not a problem.
So fundamentally, the incentives and financing tools that we have available here in Missouri, to Tina's point earlier, many of them are what we would call performance-based driven. So the business has to perform to a level of expectation. At that expectation point, they may get an allotment of that incentive, but they're not going to get it all at once, particularly if they have other milestones that they have to meet. So, for example, if they have jobs, investment, wages that we're monitoring year over year, they may get those benefits year over year. But if they stub their toe or something happens and they're not creating those jobs, they're not paying those wages, they're not making that investment, then we do something called a clawback, where we pull back whatever
in every community, it is the school who is the largest tax base. And so when when we are working through a deal with someone, we're gonna bring the superintendent in. And we're gonna say, okay, we need to make you understand the deal that we're going through right now. And we have to prove to them why it's a great deal, because he or she has to sign off on that. We require them to sign off on that. It's not necessarily has to be done. I've seen multiple times where maybe a super never even knew was gonna happen. But if you're doing your job right, you're gonna include all of the major stakeholders, and that superintendent is one of them. And I can tell you, I'm not between Lee Summit and any of my communities in Platte. If it is a multifamily or housing addition, they're gonna say no. We don't want any incentives, because those kids are coming to school, and I gotta pay for those kids, right? So that's also why you see pushback sometimes on a lot of multifamily. Not only because you want to keep your houses at a certain level, right? You just want to be sure that you don't have something right next to you that's going to bring your value down. But besides that, it's really important not to incentivize something that's going to affect a school district or without permission to do so.
One of the things in Lee Summit I know is, John Knox Village was the biggest contributor to the tax dollars, going into Lee Summit, and they were sending 0 children to the school district. It was a good deal for the school district. So that is the type of business the school district is gonna look at things like that, so. Tina and Tracy, that brings me to a good point, which is, in your experience, whether it's your current position or any of the other places that you've been, what is the board of directors or executive committee traditionally look like in an economic development organization?
So in a public-private partnership, typically you will have the mayor or city administrator, sometimes both. You'll have the superintendent of schools. You usually have an executive committee that would be a chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and those are typically some of your major employers in the community and or employers in the community. And who am I missing? I think that's about it, right?
That's pretty good. I have seen, not in the current position that I'm in now, but I have seen committees of cities that are comprised almost entirely 51% of small business owners. And then you also throw in, the school superintendent. We veered away from elected officials just because they probably would know about the projects and things like that anyway through staff updates and things like that. So usually public-private partnerships. The entity that I work for currently in Johnson County is a 501c3, which is a pretty rare entity for economic development organizations. We intentionally are a 501c3, obviously for the tax benefits from contributions and things like that. But also, we're very transparent, so we abide by sunshine law, open meeting laws, all of the things that a lot of cities and counties do. We are also fully publicly benefiting, which means that we can't charge extra for services, and all of our services and economic development, small business support are free for the asking, whether they're an investor or not. And we're very intentional when we talk about that a lot, because if this is not a pay-to-play game in our part of the world, we need everybody at the table. We need everybody at the table. We need everybody's sincere efforts and honesty about what's best for our communities, and that is locally driven in our opinion.
So, to wrap up a couple points that we've had, economic development. I know you've all been doing this for a few years, Tracy. Has changed probably a lot since you started. Just like anyone who works for city placemaking, what am I missing? That all falls in the funnel of economic development. That's a lot. At this time, Teresa, did we get any questions from the audience?
I will add one more thing to in our world, in my lens, it has changed quite a bit. It used to be that, you know, in the eighties, when I worked in a lot of small farm communities, it really was about all small business support, and, you know, the occasional recruitment project. I've also worked in Nebraska, where the average size family is 300. And again, we're doing a lot of small business support. We're also doing the occasional recruitment project. And so it is very different for, you know, whatever your situation is, whatever you want for your community, it can be very different. And so make it yours, be engaged. It's great to see everybody's faces here this evening, and, because I know that we have a wonderful opportunity for the next steps.
Do we get any questions? Okay, I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. If anyone does have any questions and you want to write those down, I don't have a wireless mic, otherwise I'd offer to come out there. So, does anyone want a call? And the city will, is going to, like I said, this is being recorded, and they're going to make sure that they answer those questions, online too, if anyone has anything. Tracy and Tina, you can find them if you Google search them. But also Nikki and Kristen and Mayor Donovan will also be, able to answer questions if you reach out to them directly. So, sorry guys. This says is, as we get started in, Pleasantville, what would we want to do? I'm assuming that's regarding an economic development council. Would it be a volunteer council, a nonprofit, option? And so, ladies, do you want to touch on this? Do you want me to hold there, touch on it?
Go ahead.
Mayor, do you want to touch on that at all, or?
So, the question is, what do we want to do, or is it going to be a volunteer council, not-for-profit option? I think one of the things is we need to weigh the different options as to which is going to work best for our community. And I think that's part of having the steering committee, and having the experts, and also, you know, where do we want to go with this? What are we looking to accomplish? And I think that's gonna determine which way we go with it. I think, you know, the way we see it so far is it's going to start off as a public board and then be able to expand from there. But we're still in the beginning stages of this. Obviously, you know, starting the Economic Development Council is something that we know we need to do, and that's why we're having this event, is, you know, to get that ball rolling.
A follow-up to that, can I get a show of hands for anyone in the audience? Are you interested in serving on a council? Fire. Okay. All right, so now we know we've got some folks that we can work with, so. Dr. Patterson is the liaison, working with Mayor and then also on the steering committee. So I think moving forward, the steering committee has kind of laid out a,
I think this is a great question. So many times when we do economic development, we don't, at the local level, either city government or the state level or the regional level, you don't have a lot of choices, right? Local folks determine their path is a great opportunity. Don't give it away, don't give it to somebody else. Make sure that you are aware of where you want to go for your community and you drive towards that goal in whatever way or fashion makes sense for you. No, there's no game plan. I mean, there's some rules to live by, there's some guidelines, there's great examples out there, but make this yours. Because again, nobody's gonna do Pleasant Hill like you do Pleasant Hill. Nobody's gonna know those things that you know.
Yeah, there is no one size fits all. It really depends on, when I look, to work with the community, it's about where are they positioned in the metro, what is next to them, what are those communities doing? But as Tracy said, it really comes back to those people in the community that are willing to do the work. So I think this is a great start with the steering committee, and then determining from there who else wants to be part of that. But I would love to see Pleasant Hill really pick an identity and a brand and run with it. I mean, what does that mean? That's the exciting part, is, who do you want to be? And then just making sure everybody in the metro knows it. And then further out, it just continues. It's like marketing a product. It really is.
There are good questions. How is the Economic Development Council different than your business chamber? This is a really great question too. So Tina and Tracy are professionals and have spoken on many panels. Also have been part of the education process through the Heartland Economic Development Council course, which is something that I attended several years ago. And that pulls economic developers from all over the Midwest, from the Dakotas down to Texas, Oklahoma, Iowa, Nebraska. It is really, really interesting to see all of the different makeups in all of the different communities. And you have people from Omaha to, what did you say, Tracy? The average Nebraska is like 300 people, right? So you've got folks there. So it is different. It really goes back to the last question. It's different for every community. Some of them do, it's only a state person doing economic development. You have county folks like they do. You have different organizations that may be at a city level. But there's a lot of those smaller communities that mix it in chamber and economic development is done together. And it works really well for those communities. I think with the comprehensive plan here, the city is trying to wrap their head around what that looks like here. So there's no definitive path going forward at this point for Pleasant Hill as far as I know. And honestly, a chamber EE mix in the future could happen. That is not a discussion that I've ever heard yet. I just want to put that out there. But there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I'll let you ladies comment on that too, because you've seen so many more professionals along the way.
Yeah, and it does depend on the area, like, I know we keep bringing up Lisa, but we work there, and it's right next door to you. They utilize a hotel bed tax for collection of the revenue, and then they split that with the chamber, the economic development, the downtown Main Street, tourism is now in there. And it took a long time to really build that up. And I would say, I was there during COVID, and after COVID, there was technically no money, right? Nobody was going there. So the revenue reduced, and they said, we can't fund you like we used to. And so then, we had to go back to the table. So sometimes public-private is hard. I can tell you right now, I am an all-membership organization, and I am also a 501c3. So I have no public funds in my organization. It is all business. I'm going to So you may as well be heard. And we can only go off of the data that we have, right? And so when I'm looking to work a project or work with a city or community, that's gonna be my first ask is, well, what are the people telling you? And then we're gonna sit down and we're gonna try and find a project that everybody wants. Either it's you want a net new something, or you wanna fix something. And if, as long as the majority is in there, you just start, you get going.
This is also a great question. It says, does Cass County have an economic office like Platt? If not, how do we get that started?
That's a no, and that's because I'm Lydia Jordan, who works in Raymond right now. Hey, Jordan, you wanna stand up?
There used to be, hi, I'm Jordan. I work for Ringward. I'm a city employee economic development person, so, not a county-wide. But, yeah, so Cass County used to have the Cass County Economic Development Corporation, so similar to what they do. However, the membership, which was mostly cities, I don't know if any businesses were comprised in it, it disbanded when I was only like 1 or 2 years into my role when I was with Dalton. And so it kind of just dissolved. It didn't really do a lot to help bring business to Cass County. It was more of a networking type of group, so it wasn't really doing what these two do for the counties that they're in. So it disbanded. That's not to say that it won't happen again, but it would be more beneficial in Pleasantville to have their own as opposed to relying on the requirements.
But we're open for business.
The more the better.
There was one, and when we were, I think, when maybe all three of us were at, East Summit Economic Development Council, there was also an Eastern Jackson development, that we were the administrators for at East Summit EDC, and a lot of that was, the communities would pay in based on their population. So let's just say $1 per person in your population. And then that money was, brought together and pooled to represent Eastern Jackson County, in site selection and, different things like that. So there, again, one of those options that could definitely be talked about, down the road. I think it's more imperative that Pleasant Hill figure out our identity first. But again, we're open for business, Jordan. Are there additional questions? Anyone write anything down that we have not collected? No? On that note, I want to thank Tina and Tracy, their time, expertise, passion for economic development this evening.
want to thank again for our presenters and our moderator for sharing all your expertise with us. We greatly appreciate the time and effort that you've put into helping us here. A couple of things that we have in the works. We have a strategic planning meeting that's going to be happening within City Council to help set the priorities of what we're going to be working on long range. We got a housing study that we're going to be doing, and also a targeted industry analysis. And all of that's going to be funneling all into the Economic Development Council. So, if there's one thing that everyone should take away from tonight, it's that economic development isn't something that just happens at City Hall, right? It's not the responsibility of one committee, one organization, or one elected official. Building a stronger Pleasant Hill is going to take us all, and it's something that we all have a role in, okay? One of the easiest ways to help is supporting our local businesses. When we choose to shop local, eat local, and use local services whenever we can, we're investing right back into our community. These dollars help support jobs, create opportunities, and strengthen our tax base that pays for the services and amenities that we all enjoy. Another way to help is getting involved. Communities don't move forward because a handful of people do all the work. They move forward because people step up. They volunteer, they share ideas, and are willing to be part of the solution. Whether you're serving on a committee, helping with a community event, mentoring a local entrepreneur, or simply showing up and showing your perspective, it all matters. And if any of you are interested in being part of the Economic Development Council and helping move that forward, contact Kristen Dorman, our city administrator, and she'll make sure that we'll compile a list. Councilman Patterson, who's the liaison to that organization, we'll get everything going. But as we continue working toward the Economic Development Council and developing a long-term strategy for Pleasant Hill, your involvement is going to be important. The best plans don't happen behind closed doors. They're built with input from people who live here, work here, and care about the future of this community. I truly believe that Pleasant Hill has a tremendous opportunity in front of us. We have great people, strong local businesses, and a community that cares deeply about where we're headed. If we continue to work together and think beyond the next year or two, we can build a future that supports responsible growth, strengthens our local economy, and preserves the character and quality of life that Pleasant Hill, that makes Pleasant Hill a place that we've chose to call home. I want to thank everybody again for being here tonight and caring enough to be a part of the process. This isn't the end of the conversation, this is just the beginning, and I look forward to working with all of you as we build the future for Pleasant Hill. Thank you.